So just a few questions for the group before I ask you specific questions. Often the first step in getting a manuscript published is finding a writing agent. Could you each describe how you found your agent and then what that relationship is currently like?
Oh my gosh, I've been with my agent for so long. So typically, this is how it works. You write a book, and you have to write it in its entirety if you're planning on writing a novel or something, fictional work. And then you search the internet for agents that might be looking for something that you have written. So, for example, my agent was on a website. I don't even know what it's called. I think it's defunct now, but she was a new agent, and she had posted a wish list of different stories she likes to read and represent. So I saw that she liked psychological thrillers, lyrical writing, dark fantasy, which is kind of my genre. So I sent her a query letter, which is a one-page document you use to sell your book, basically. And it kind of reads like the back of a book jacket. So you got to really catch their interest and tell them about you and your book. And then she requested the first half of it only and read it. And then I was stalking her on Twitter, and I saw late one evening she was tweeting, "I have to get the second half of this book. I'm so excited." And I was like, "Is it my book?" I was so excited. And then I checked my email, and it was my book, so I sent her the second half. And then she called me a few days later to offer representation for that book in my career. Funny story, I actually had my son 5 weeks early, and she called me in my hospital room to offer representation, and I didn't tell her I was in the hospital because I was like, she's gonna think I'm never gonna write a book again. I just had a baby. So there's like doctors taking my blood pressure, and I'm like, yes, I would like to be represented by you. But now we laugh about it, and I've been with her for 6 years now, and we have a great relationship. She's my friend on top of my agent, and is always willing to give me some good advice on my writing and some tough love too. So.
I've been with my agent, Rosemary Stamola, since 2008, actually. I went to U of M for screenwriting, and I thought I was going to live in LA. I thought I was going to write movies for a living, and then I had my wisdom teeth taken out, and my doctor broke my jaw in 2 places. So I had the entire summer. I was going to work on the set of a movie that was filming in Ann Arbor. I had a whole thing going on. And instead I had nothing all of a sudden. I couldn't eat, I couldn't do anything. So I wrote this book instead, and I queried my agent, and she got back to me the next day, asked for a partial. I sent it to her. The next day she asked for the full, and then a couple days later she offered representation. And it was a great situation. I've been with her, for 12 years now, and I feel like everybody's query story is this amazing aha moment, but honestly, I'd been querying for a good 8 years before that with nothing. I had one agent offer when I was 18, and immediately the next day she wrote to me and said that her boss didn't like my story and she had to rescind her offer, which was absolutely crushing at the time. And so while these stories are going to be awesome and they're so exciting, it does take a while usually, and it's a hardship. It's a slog to really get an agent.
So I was, the first time I was trying to get an agent, I went on some online contests, and so they had a couple different ones going on, which they had Writer's Voice and some other ones that are no longer online anymore, and that's kind of how I got noticed a little bit. And then I've had 2 agents. So I had an agent that I had first, and she ended up leaving the business, so that was pretty heartbreaking. However, I supported her choice to leave, and so we were querying a book that I had already, not querying, we were sending out a book that I had already written, and so we had to pull that back from some of the editors, and then I had to query again, so I kind of started again after having already had an agent. So that was definitely a unique experience, but it taught me a lot, and I'm really glad it happened because the second agent I have is the one I have currently, and we're really close, and she's super patient because I have a really demanding day job, and so I only write maybe a book a year, if that, and so she's really patient with me, and I think that that's super important, is your own pace that you go and make sure that your agent is cool with that, because a lot of people churn out books, more than me, but she likes my writing, and so it works out. But yeah, so I've had 2. Hopefully, just the 2 is where we'll stop.
Like a
but
marriage almost.
I know.
Too.
It is kind of like a marriage.
It really is.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say real quick, I think being a lifelong Detroit's Lions fan is like the best metaphor for being in this business.
Actually,
Yeah, seriously.
There's a lot of
It's true.
There's a lot of waiting for the big win.
That may never come.
That may never come.
we have secondary teams like the Chiefs.
Right. So I was a school teacher. I worked on my first book, Jumped In, for a few years, and had a lot of feedback from friends who were in theater and film and were into stories, so they helped me out a lot, and teachers. But I didn't really know about the next step, like how you take that next step. I learned about querying, and then I was lived in Seattle, but I was in Palo Alto with my wife for a summer, and I was in the public library in Palo Alto, and I said I was working on my book, and I said, this is it, I'm done. I don't know what else to do on this book. So I said, I'm gonna query an agent. So I got up at the library, I went to the teens section of the library and said, I'm gonna open the flaps of these books until I find the book that's the closest match to mine. And I'm gonna say, if an agent liked this book and liked this author, then I think they would like me.
Smart.
So I finally found the one book, picked it
That's
up,
very smart.
researched the author's agent, and in a week that guy was my agent. He's Stephen Chudney. He's got a small.
I didn't know it was only a week.
Yeah, he offered super fast.
Disclaimer, that's not normal.
That's not a normal story,
Months.
and I feel completely lucky. That story could have gone this
you're
way
talented.
too, where they're like, oh, I already have that author. I have you already. It's the person that wrote that book. So that, the person could have just said, you're nowhere near that. That story could have gone a million different ways, and I got lucky. So I'm with a small kind of boutique
No, go ahead.
agent who he used to be in sales in the publishing world and decided to open up his own agency, and he does a nice job. We don't have a friendship per se. We're cordial with each other, and it's
Like a
nice, and he's
lawyer
a good
almost.
person. And he's not an editorial agent, but he knows how to sell my books. So,
How many agents did you query? Was it just him?
well, yeah, at that time,
Are you
honestly, way before my book was ready, I tried it, but I didn't really even have I don't really count it, but I did query some people that I never
Seriously?
heard back
I
from.
queried
One and done.
Hundreds.
No.
Hundreds.
I
Okay.
got lucky.
Oh my God.
You're talented.
Wow.
You didn't get
So to that point, Amy, having queried hundreds of agents,
Yeah.
you're now on the other side. You're a #1 best-selling international author, and writing is now your full-time job. Can you talk a little bit about the pressure of writing for a living? It seems glamorous.
Boy, can't I.
Can you talk about what it's like? So you have a room full of Googlers who, maybe aspire to being a full-time writer. What is it like when it is your job?
One of the things I tell people who want to become a full-time writer is make sure you have another creative outlet. It took me a long time to learn this. Writing has been my creative outlet since I was 10 years old. I wrote every day. I've written almost every single day since I turned 10. And suddenly this was my job. And I had to write instead of chose to write. I had to pay my bills. I had to feed my cats. I had to do all these things. Healthcare being what it is, I had all that. And all of a sudden, it was all on me to perform. And the thing about writing is, even after I've sold, I think 15 books, 16. Even then, you can spend months and months and months working on a book that doesn't sell, or that your agent doesn't like, or that editors will fall in love with, but the rest of their publishing company isn't too into it, so you can't sell to them. And you can, quote unquote, waste a lot of time in a full-time gig, and you don't have anything to fall back on. So it's very, very stressful. And I've had deadlines for 2 different books, for 2 different contracts that are pushing up against each other. For instance, I had 2 books to do it on the exact same day at one point in my career. And they were for 2 different companies, and I had to eventually tell one of them, you know, I'm sorry, I have to get a little bit more time. But it's all on you to make a schedule. You don't really have anybody telling you, okay, this is what you have to do, this is what you have to do, this is what you have to do. It is a lot of stress and pressure, and it's not for everybody. I do highly recommend that even if you make enough to make it your full-time job, to also have a part-time job, not just for insurance benefits, but also to have something to go to and to have something to fill your days with. So it can be hard.
And what do you do to make your schedule and to get your writing done, Amy?
So I wake up at noon most days. It's actually true. I write at night. And what I have to do, and I've just started to implement this, is I write myself a checklist of things to do. And I'm not a list maker. I'm very, very type B, kind of go with the flow. And so it was a really hard transition. I've been doing this for 7 years now, full time. And it's...
You also have your friends to hold you accountable.
Yes, sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't know what you meant, man. Yeah, Andrea and I will do, we definitely hold each other accountable every single day. And we'll text back and forth, and we'll do word sprints, which is, we'll both sit down and write for 30 minutes straight and report back to each other at the end to see who wrote more, so.
She always wins. But, you know, it's at least something's getting done, right?
Yeah,
So,
every word on the page is important. Doesn't matter who wins, it's playing the game.
says the person who wins all the time, right?
So, follow-up question for you, Andrew. To Amy's point about not every book you write sell, you've been very open. And so, for those of you who may not know, Andrea writes newsletters, and she's very prolific in trying to help a creative audience bring out their best creative selves. So, in your newsletters and your retreats, you're very open that you've not always sold all of your books. How do you think about what that's like with a book that doesn't sell? Do you shelve it and think about perhaps updating it, selling it later? What's your thought on self-publishing? And what is that emotional journey when you put all of this energy into writing something that doesn't sell?
That's like a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
All right, so let's start. I'll start with a story that happened to me 2 weeks ago. So I had this laptop. I've had it for 5 years. I've stored all my old books that I've written on it, and it just randomly died on a Tuesday. And I had to take it to the Apple store, and the guy's like, yeah, this is never coming back. RIP, please buy a new one. So I did, and I found that I had only saved work from the past year in my cloud. So I had lost pretty much everything else that I had written over, I don't know, a decade. And I also found that I was not upset about it. And here's why. Because in my heart, I knew I was never going back to those books, because I am a much different writer now than I was when I wrote those books that didn't sell. And by didn't sell, I mean, like, I might have spent a couple years on them. My agent and I went through them together. They went on submission to editors. They may have gotten really close to selling, and then somebody said no. They went on multiple rounds of submissions, and this is like, I think 3 or 4 books, maybe even more. So, which is obviously heartbreaking, right? You spend a lot of time planning and dreaming about it, but I also never plan to go back to them. Once it's done for me, it's done. And I, like I was telling Patrick before this started, the book that I recently finished, I pulled pieces from all the things that I had written that didn't sell and put them in this new book, but I will never go back to a finished product to revise it again, because every book you write, you change as a person and as a writer. And then you will read your old things and be like, I don't even, what was I thinking, kind of thing. That is ridiculous. Stuff that you couldn't see before, you'll see. And then what was the other part of this question that I'm supposed to say?
Self-publishing.
Yeah,
self-publishing.
And how is it viewed in the industry?
Yeah, so I also, A Map for Wild Hearts is self-published, and my reasoning for that, That's my creative guidebook. Is I wrote that book. I wrote a proposal for it. I had it professionally edited. My agent loved it. It went on submission. It got to acquisitions 6 times. So,
6 times.
yeah, 6 times is where somebody reads it, loves it, and then they go through second reads, and the marketing department reads it, and then they have to sit around and decide if they're going to buy this book. And it did not get sold all 6 times because the marketing department was like, I don't know how to sell this kind of thing, because it's a hybrid. It's like part story, part memoir, part creative visualization and prompting, and it's a different breed of book. So I decided that that was not a good enough reason for me not to publish it. Nobody told me that there was something logically wrong with it, that it didn't make sense. So I self-published it. I had a professional, designer. I did the whole thing. I did marketing. It's sold at bookstores. I did a signing with Amy. And I highly recommend it if you do it the right way. If you put in the time to really edit, have a professional editor look at it, spend a lot of time, getting critique and feedback, and really position it in the right way, I think it's valuable and worth it. The reason why self-publishing gets a bad rap is because sometimes people just write a crappy draft and throw it up on the internet, and then readers will find it and be like, wow, this sucks, this is terrible. But there are really great self-published books out there too. In the industry, it's been traditionally frowned upon, especially like I'm considered a hybrid author because I have self-published book and a traditionally published book. Because any book that you publish, editor or publishing house can type up your name and see how many copies of something you've sold before they decide to buy something else. But I really think that is changing as well. I feel like people are more open to self-publishing. More traditionally successful authors are self-publishing now. Yeah, I don't know. Anybody else want to hop in on that? What you think of self-publishing? Because I don't know. That's my opinion. But
No, I agree. It really depends on the time you put into it. It's what you're going to get out of it, basically. As far as how publishing sees it, yeah, definitely, it's much more acceptable now than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. I was highly, highly, highly encouraged not to self-publish, but that was also 10 years ago, and the ebook industry especially has changed the name of the game for that one.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and honestly, you're going to get more money if you self-publish, but the trade-off to that is you're not going to have the marketing behind it that you would with a traditional, and you won't have a big-name publisher behind you either. So it is a trade-off, but it really depends on what your book needs.
Mm-hmm.
So to that point, it's clear that this is very much a business, right? And how we can sell a book, so it's beyond just writing. And to your point, Amy, that it's your creative outlet.
Yeah.
Erica, question for you. In your novel, Teach Me to Forget, you tackle a very tough subject of teenage suicide. And thinking about that from a business perspective, one, how do you think about tackling a really tough topic? And then two, what is the impact that you've received from your readers on tackling such a tough topic?
So what I wasn't prepared for with writing about a tough topic like teen suicide is how do you market that? And so I haven't really been able to answer that yet. I mean, I think in a lot of ways you could, capitalize on situations that happen, but I don't want to do that. That's just not who I am, and it's not the type of author that I am. And so a lot of it's been word of mouth. I think this particular book, I call it the little book that could, because it started with a smaller publisher that got bought by Simon & Schuster, and then they decided to do a paperback and change the cover, make it almost like a completely different book. And that's really done well for this book, so I was really grateful for that. However, the marketing is left up to me. And so one thing that has been, that was a really big part of marketing this book was connecting with other authors who also write harder subjects, like Kathleen Glasgow, and she gave me the blurb for the front of the book, and she wrote, oh my God, Girl in Pieces, and then she has her new one, How to Make Friends with the Dark. And so she would add like my bookmarks when she would get requests from libraries and stuff. So it's really about kind of connecting with other authors as well as that way it's an authentic communication as opposed to saying hashtag mental health. You know, I mean, it is difficult. But for me, it wasn't about that. It was about getting it in teens' hands so that the message would be spread, so the dialogue would start about a topic like that. And actually, my goddaughter, who just turned 13, her mom finally gave her permission to read it. She said she read it in 2 days, and I said, you know, ask me questions about it. And she said she was ready because she came home from school and was asking questions about it. And so that's the type of thing, that's the reason I write books like that, and that's the reason I write it all. And so the second part of your question was about,
What is
yes,
the impact from the
yep.
readers on tackling such a tough
So I've had a decent amount of teenagers reach out to me and tell me thank you, and say, they tell me their stories. I've had adults too, it's not just teenagers. And I had a couple of readers say that they have more empathy for people going through that, which is like the best gift that you could get for writing a story that's difficult like that. And so it's been really positive. And I think it's an important topic, and I think it should be continued to be talked about in open forums. And I hope that it's allowing parents and their teens and even, you know, tweens to discuss this important topic. Because if they're old enough to do it, they're old enough to.
But I think what I've learned from you, and as a room of prospective authors, what I can tell you is learn from people who have walked the walk. And I've learned from this panel so much, but Patrick and Erica, when you talk about writing about really difficult topics, the need for sensitivity readers, the needs to be able to have that outside counsel and opinions. Mm-hmm. That's why I asked you that question, because I think, to your point, some of these topics still resonate a decade later, and it's really important to be able to say, you know, own voices in publishing is a new movement, right? It's really important to tell these stories, but at the same time, you know, creativity comes from many different angles, and just be sure to do your homework and have those.
And in terms of the sensitivity reader, the whole thing gets knocked a lot, like your voice is being suppressed and your story is being messed with. But in my experience, like it just meant I ended up with a much better book. It like not only was it more like right and more sensitive, but it just was way better after she did her critique of it,
Yep.
and I wrote based on the critique. It was just better. I needed to hear from her, and she was amazing.
I actually won't write a book without a sensitivity reader because I'm filling my world with diverse voices. And so for me, especially, even if the protagonist is still someone of my heritage and even a mental illness, I'm still going to have someone else read it who is of that, who can tell me, just make it a better book, basically. And I think it's super important.
Yeah.
So even if you're writing about just a regular subject, I still think I recommend it.
Also, I just want to be super clear. Own voices isn't new. Like, there have been people doing this work for decades. It's just gotten some traction because we have social media and stuff.
Yeah. No, that's a very valid point.
We're more
hashtag and
Yes,
everything.
Yeah.
right.
We're more responsible now, I think, than we ever have been because we're more aware of
The
stories
lack of
that
diversity
yes.
within stories. And the
Before
needs
it's
to tell
like
those
write whatever
stories.
you want, and now it's like write, but make sure it's respectful, make sure that you're doing your research, all of that.
And that if you should be the one to tell that story, because let's face it, there's
Absolutely.
only so many books that get published per year,
Yeah.
right? And as white writers, we get, a little bit privileged, and we get more chances, I would say. So you have to really consider, should I tell this story? Should I take this space? Because you are taking somebody's space when you write that story, because there are only so many books that get published per year.
Yep.
It's just something
Is that
to
my
consider.
story to tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about tone. Amy, question for you, because I know in your bio you have released series that are both young adult and middle grade. How do you determine when you start off on an idea that this is going to be middle grade versus young adult versus perhaps you also write adult? And then what do you think about in that creative process, and how do they differ when you're creating?
So children's books especially are broken up by age group. You have your YA, which is of course 14 and up, so teenagers. You have your middle grade, which is usually 8 to 12 or 8 to 13 years old. And then I think you have chapter books and early chapter books and picture books and all the way down. And the way I really figure it out is I look at the story as a whole. And I try to figure out, okay, is this going to have a lot of adult themes, for instance? Is this going to be something that I would expect a teenager to be dealing with? Is there a safety net in the form of parents or adults around that could help the protagonist in a way? But the main thing that determines what age group a book is the age of the protagonist. So, for instance, I'm writing a series now where the protagonist has to be 13 years old at the very most, because it's a middle grade book, so it's for 8 to 12-year-olds. And the general consensus, or the general feeling, is that children won't read down. So they won't read about kids who are younger than them in general. Of course, there's always going to be exceptions. But they will read about kids who are older than them. So that's why you see a lot of YA about young adults, about 18-year-olds. You're probably not going to get many 18-year-olds, especially those who are in college, reading that book, but you will get high school age kids. And of course, young adults specifically, to correct myself here, is very much read widely by adults. I think more than 50% of the audience for young adults is actual adults. But college age, for some reason, a lot of college age will, for some reason, they're busy with classes. They don't,
Well, and other
a
stuff.
little bit, yeah. They tend not to read YA. It's usually college grads versus high school. So yeah, it's very much protagonist age and the themes of the story.
Transitioning, Andrea, you've turned your writing into a business. You have retreats and workshops, and you teach college courses on the topic. How do you think about writing with authenticity? And then also within those workshops, you talk about using your writing to process all that's happened in your life. How do you think about teaching within this space?
Like teaching creativity and authenticity as a writer?
Writing with authenticity, or how do you think about guiding? So a
Okay.
room, what best advice would you give in that space?
Okay, well,
It's
it's a
very
hard
complex.
question.
I know you can handle it as a former teacher.
You know, I think there are two modes of writing that I tell everybody about. Creativity and writing in general has been a method and a mode that we have all used to heal for thousands of years, right? And I think that it is necessary for everyone to have some kind of outlet, whether it's gardening or writing or, painting, or frankly, I have a fancy espresso machine and I like to make different drinks. That is my creative outlet. That's not writing. I always have them come over and be like, come on, you want a peppermint latte? But off track. But
They're very good.
the point is that everybody needs something to process their emotions in some way. I don't think that everything that you write to process your emotions necessarily needs to be published or needs to be part of your business plan for writing. So I have my own personal writing that I work through in journaling and, stories that will never see the light of day, or just memories that I want to write about. And that is what I use to process. However, when I'm writing for Bustle, I'm selling stuff. When I'm writing books, I'm selling my book. When I'm writing my newsletters, I'm selling my workshops. So all of that stuff, I will take seeds of authenticity from my private writing and plant them in that newsletter, in that copywriting, in those books. But it's not necessarily full out info dump, emotional dump on people. Because I think, frankly, if you're a creative person and you want to be a writer, it's your job to spread a message that is, I don't necessarily want to say positive and hopeful, but like you're building a new world, right? So use your power of creativity to build something bigger and better than what's in existence. Don't use it to spread your own heartache everywhere. So yes, you use the seeds of heartache to write the story with authenticity, but you don't necessarily need to spread all of your emotional pain everywhere. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I know this is a passion point for you within your
Yeah.
workshops and within teaching, and I know even within the writing community, so many people have learned from you. So those nuggets are important to share. Eric, a question for you. So in your intro, obviously you write with humor and you talk about tweeting, etc. And I've heard amongst you people talk about personal brand. How do you think about within the digital space? So I know in her day job, she also works in digital marketing. How do you think about personal brand in the age of social media?
I think it's super important. I think before you even have anything published, that you need to grab your username, and that is why I'm actually Erica M. Chapman, because Erica Chapman was some real estate person in Texas on Twitter, and that was in 2009. And so I built a community based on that brand. And so my website, actually, I bought the domains of Teach Me to Forget and also ericachapman.com. So if anybody Googles me, those all get directed to my website. And so I think it's important to think about those business aspects in addition to writing. These are very separate things to me, very separate. Writing is very personal and very, I put all my heartache in it, and I don't see nothing. It's all in there, but it's true. But the business side is completely different. For me, it's completely different. And so I think it's really important that, not that you would censor yourself, but that you remember that others are watching, others are reading, but still be yourself. I mean, I'm a goofball who shares a lot of cat videos. My favorite video is a panda eating a carrot. If you
Oh my God,
haven't
that's
seen
the best. It's the
video.
best.
That is my
So
favorite
cute.
video. So my brand is really, these are animal videos and I love them. And also like mental health awareness for sure. Anything that has to do with diversity in writing, and you know, I amplify voices that are underrepresented. I think that's important too. And of course, shout out about my friends' books and, you know, everything else. So when you go to my Twitter or my Facebook, you know what you're gonna get. You're not just gonna, that's what it's really all about, is branding. Make sure that, you know, I've had people go on my page and go, hey, the Foo Fighters have a new album. I'm like, I know, you know, because they know that that's part of, like, I'm a huge Foo Fighters fan. And so once you get that part of your brand where people actually think of you before you've thought of it, then you've done your job. So.
Okay, so I have one final question before we open it up to the crowd. And Patrick, I'll start with you and work back. It's a question for all of you, which is just, what's the best advice you could offer to someone who's looking to write and release a book?
I think if you want to, I think those are two really different things in a certain way. Like, I think the first one can be a really healthy thing. The second one may or may not be healthy. Like, writing is creativity, and it's this outlet, and it's a place for us to process. And getting a book sold and being in the publishing industry is adds something to that, because it's really cool to have your book between two hardcovers and in a library and in bookstores and stuff. But it also takes away something from it, which is like the innocence and I don't know, the wholesomeness of like the task of just writing. But I think but my advice is, like, if you want to do the book part, then make a decision that you're going to end up with a published book. Like, people do it, and it's like in other things in life, like if you want to open a business or whatever, there are like these steps that you take. But I think sometimes people are wishy-washy about the book thing, and they think they want to get They want to get published, but they don't make the decision. So to me, by making the decision to get your book published, it means writing every day or having a writing schedule. And it means sharing your writing with other people who can help make your writing better. It means taking workshops and classes. And and it means setting goals and deadlines and
Andrea's my beta writer or reader right now as we speak. So
yeah,
yes, I would
that's
agree.
awesome. So you've made that decision. I think because I think I have this thing where I think almost every idea for a book is like a really cool publishable thing at an idea stage. And then it's just a matter of taking those steps to like take it all the way. And for some people, that process is a 1.5-year long process. For me, it's
was
an
a decade.
decade-long process. But either way, like the decision at the end is that this is going to be a published book. And if it doesn't work out, that's not on you, right? You've done all the work to get there, and that's a bummer if it doesn't work out. But you need to just make this decision. I am going to get published, so I'm going to do the things that published authors do.
So
There's
mine's
no magic to that.
a little different. And that's okay.
That is all right.
I think you have to have passion for what you're writing, because if you're going to get up every day or every other day or like once a week or like every few months like me, then you really need to like what you're writing. And I think separating the publishing part from your writing will be beneficial. It is for me. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but for me, I really have to like be passionate about what I'm writing, and I can't think about where it's going, because then it curbs what my first draft is always just going to be for me, and I think that's the advice I would give. Write a first draft for you. Don't worry about the reader at all, because that's how you're really going to get that first authentic draft. And so I also think it's important to finish it, because I have like a lot of half-finished novels, which is fine in my opinion. I think that's how you kind of get to a finished one. But if you're thinking about publishing and you want to choose to make that choice, see, we'll segue there, then you have to have a finished book. And so even if it's crappy, you finished it and you have something to work with. And so I also think it's important that you have others read your stories, and because you're your worst critic, but you're also your biggest fan.
Yeah.
So other people can point out, inconsistencies and things like that. So I don't want to take a bunch of other people's, advice, but for me, I really think you really need passion for what you're saying, or else why are you doing it,
Yeah.
right?
I'm totally on board
All
with
right.
all that.
Awesome.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I have 3, and they are quick. First of all, kind of in the vein of what you guys were talking about, write the book that you would want to read. That is honestly the best piece of advice I can give. If you don't want to read it, no one else will. But if you do read it, then I guarantee you someone else will want to read that book. And that's kind of how I started. I had these ideas in my head when I was a kid, and I went to the bookstore, the library, and looked for these books, and they didn't exist. So I decided to write them instead. Second piece of advice is read. I feel like that gets overlooked a little bit, especially when you're so focused on writing, and you're like, I don't have time to read, or I don't want to steal someone else's voice, or have influence from other writers. But that's it's a little bit silly. I get it. I totally felt the same way for a long time. But the way you fill the creative well and the way you get excited about writing is reading in a lot of ways.
Yeah, creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
That's true.
You have to keep absorbing and read as much as you can in the genre you're writing. And lastly, learn to take critique. That's very, very important. It is so hard to spend months writing, or however long it takes you, months writing a book, and then to hand it to someone and get notes back that say, this isn't nearly as good as you actually think it is. But
Which is almost always the case.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
no. I've been doing this for 12 years now, and I've never, ever, and I've written over 24 books, some of which have been published, some of which haven't. None of them have been perfect at all from the first draft. They all need work, and that's how it is. You need to learn to take someone's critique and learn to differentiate between, okay, this person has a really good point, how do I fix it? Versus, okay, maybe this person doesn't quite understand what I'm trying to do with that book. So it is a learning process, and you do have to have a thick skin in some ways in publishing while still retaining that thin skin so you can, be vulnerable on the page and have that emotion there. But yeah, you really do need to learn to take critique and constructive critique, and sort of learn how to fix your manuscript with that.
Oh, that's a lot of good advice. To piggyback off what you said about critique, to be honest with you, not selling those 3 to 4 books was the best thing that ever happened to me for a lot of reasons. One, I realized in that time period that I didn't want to just be a writer. I am a natural teacher, so it's good that I branched out that way. But in that time period, I had always seen myself as a writer, mostly because other people told me that I was a good writer, right? Your teacher, your dad, everybody that you want praise and love from is like, you're a great writer, you should be a writer. So when you have 3 or 4 things that don't get published and you've poured your heart and soul into them, you kind of lose a little bit of your identity there. And that was good for me because it helped me develop in different ways to really get strong in my own values, what matters to me outside of writing, who I am outside of writing. So now coming back into it, I just finished my first young adult draft in 3 years. But
Congrats.
Thanks. Thank you.
And it's really good. It's really good.
I'm sure you'll tell me what's wrong with it after you read it, but it's fine. But to come back to it with a new perspective, I have much thicker skin because I feel like I have worth and value outside of the writing process as well. So, like when Amy will eventually tell me all of the things that are wrong with my book of it, it won't hurt. Like it will feel like, all right, I can fix it because I have more confidence now, and I feel like I'm a much better writer. So I would just say to you, enjoy the process, enjoy other people's critique, and really learn to find value outside of the process as well, so that when you're in the process, you feel good about the critique you get.
And I think, just to add to that a little bit, sorry.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to sell your first book. You may not sell your second, third, fourth, or fifth. I wrote over 24 novels before my first book was published.
So you gotta love it.
Yeah, you really have to love doing this.
And revising.
Yeah, and when you do get to the published stage and you're in editing and revising, you're going to read that sucker over and over and over and over and over again until you want to gouge out your own eyes, and it's awful. So you really do have to love what you're doing. Yeah. It's not quick money, guys.
So thank you all.
Thank
I
you.
will
Thank you.
add one last piece of advice that I have learned from all of you, which is find a writing community. Find people that you respect, that you look up to, that you can learn from. So thank you for being that for me. Thank you for coming today. Does anyone have any questions?
First, how do you know when you've written something really, really good that you want to take it out there, get feedback, or try and get published? And second, criticism. Like when the first critiques came out of the books here or anything else, how do you react to them? Do you read them? Do you not even worry about it? How does that entire process work?
I don't read anything. I don't go on Goodreads. I don't go on Amazon. I don't go anywhere because for me, my job is done. When the book is published, what anybody else says about it is none of my business because I've done my work. The feedback that I need, I get from my writing community beforehand. So, and there's a great quote by Brene Brown where she says, like, why are you listening to people who aren't standing in the arena, right? So anybody can critique a book, but are you in there writing a book? Then I don't know. So I take my critique partners and my writing communities and my agents' voice to heart, but I don't need to hear what everybody on Amazon has to say about it. What was the other question? I forget.
How do you know when you really have a good story?
I think it's just years of like, you build your intuition around it, right? And it's years of reading and reading other people's work and reading your genre and keeping up with the publishing industry and seeing what's out there. I mean, there are things I've written that I've been like, this is good. Like, it makes sense. It's good enough, but it's only once in a while where I write something and I feel like it hits all the right marks. And I think it's just intuition, really. honestly, but maybe you have a better answer than I do.
If I want to reread that book, then I know it's a good one. Honestly, if I get through writing it, then
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's a good one. Because it's no joke to sit down every day and to enter this world and try to write these characters. And if they're not good enough, if they're not strong enough to hold my attention, then they're not going to be strong enough to hold anybody's attention. So
I read all of it. I have a really thick skin.
Really?
I read every review everywhere.
You're one of the only people I know that does
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. In fact, when I get down there, once they've quoted me and said things, I'm like, you know, they have kind of a point.
Yeah, I've had good criticism.
How are you ever going to learn?
From your people.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. Say what you will.
I read just about everything too, and I hate it. It's totally self-defeating and
Yeah,
ridiculous.
wow.
Like, it's so bad. Like,
Mental
because you know
health,
what? Like when somebody,
don't.
if I read a raving awesome review of something I've written, you know, it's happened a couple times where the people just like love your stuff, and I'm like, yeah, okay. So like it doesn't do anything for me, and then I read one that somebody's like, he totally got this wrong and it sucks, and then I'm like, yeah. They're right. They're right. When it's bad, they're right, and when it's good, it's like, okay, yeah.
But you're
how it always
keeping
is.
all of it out, though, even the good. Like, there's a lot of good out there, more good than bad.
I don't
And
need
it
the
was-
good.
Good just
I got my
And
own.
that
Yeah.
makes me feel good that I've, you know, that's how I can say what they've said. If you know, I
I'm
know
good,
I'm
man.
I'm a weirdo, but it's okay.
Everybody has their own thing.
Yeah.
I can't stop.
But
Like
I think
I just need the checks in the mail. That's all I get.
yeah.
the other answer to your question, though, you may not know. You may not know if it's good. For me, I pick like a personal message, and I build a story around it, and I get to the end, and I'm like, all right, I had some moments where I was like feeling something, so let me send it to other people and get their feedback. That's how I kind of know that it's hit the mark. I don't know personally when I read it, because I've got that little inner voice that's like, this is crap, and you know that you're not going to go anywhere, and blah, blah, blah. And you know, you got to shut that voice up. And then, so you may not know, but others will tell you, your community of writers that you share it with.
Yeah. It's also hard to know because, like, I have the, it's hard to read your own stuff. And I, in my mind, what I'm reading is this end goal version packed with emotion, packed with thrills and chills. And the thing I'm reading on the page is a step towards that, but it's not that yet. But I'm reading it like it's this. So again, that's where the critique partners and the helpers come in.
You know what I didn't interrupt you.
No, not at all.
What I do is I send it to my Kindle or Google tablet, and know your audience. And I read it like a reader. So I take it from the computer and I read it like a reader, and then I look at those nuances and say, "What is this, like a real book that I'm reading?" And that really helps me personally.
You
because-
can't make the changes. as
Yeah,
reading.
you're not
You have
making
to-
any
yeah.
changes. You're not editing, because you'll be editing when you read it on your
Yeah.
computer, on your tablet.
Your Chromebook.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is it? Yeah, Chromebook. You
I am a Google girl, okay?
Me too. You can read it that way as a reader, and that will help you to determine maybe if it's got some legs or not. So.
Hi there. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's
Awesome.
been very informative and insightful.
Thank you for having us.
Yes,
This is
thank
so
you
much
so
fun.
much.
Is this on, by the way? Can everyone hear me?
I don't know if it's on.
Cool. My question is around the commercial viability of publishing and reconciling that with your actual creative, authentic voice. When it comes down to it, for those of you on the panel, how do you balance being able to create a book that can sell well while having an authentic story, while feeling like you're actually telling your own personal truth and writing with that passion? Just out there.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive by any means. I think what you're passionate about, you can absolutely create something commercial around that. There's this idea that if it's not literary writing and you're not, dealing with tough subjects or all of this, it's not literature. That's bull. We were actually discussing this last night. No matter how quote unquote fluffy something might seem, or how cartoony or middle grade, about kids changing into animals, which is one of my series. There are always going to be threads of your emotional truth in there, because that's just who you are as a person, and that's who you are with your voice. And just because people want to read it does not mean it's not literary or not literature, if that makes sense. And I do think it's an instinct, and it's something you very much, you can absolutely learn. I may want to write one thing, but I know that as I'm picturing it, it may not fit the 3-act structure, for instance, of a screenplay. But you can make anything commercial. You can really turn anything into a story as long as you have the tools, as long as you've done the research and learned how. Writing is something you really, and storytelling specifically, is something you do need to learn. But once you know the basics, anything can be commercial.
It's true. If you look at the examples of even like movies that are popular, not all of them are commercial. Like Marriage Story, that wasn't really. It was a story about 2 people going through, no spoilers, but divorce. And
Schmuss-force
yeah, it's really good. So that you wouldn't look at that and go, wow, that's a really commercial story. I think people are really good. You really don't know until it gets out, and you get, sometimes you have to tell the story that's inside of you and send it out to the world and hope for the best.
Oh, Alicia has the mic.
Apparently, I have the mic, so I have the power. You talk about finding your community. So could you give us some advice on finding your writing community, and also how do you know you found the right community? Because I think there's a very big difference between finding people who will tell you they love your work versus finding people who will help you make your work better.
Yes.
Well, it works like a friendship. These are people that there has to be an amount of trust that you have in them. I think, so I first met some people on Twitter back, it was like 2009 or something, and there's a large group of us that got very close, and only a couple of us are still friends. So it really depends on, I think finding a local group is a good idea too. Come to things like this so you can meet other writers like that, and
Go to one of Andrea's
I was
retreats.
just gonna say that Andrea actually is we all went to her retreat. Patrick, you gotta go to that.
Yeah, Patrick. Patrick.
But
Find my community.
I know.
so really having other writers introduce you to other people, and just like making friends, it's kind of similar to that. And then there's an online element to that. If you go on certain hashtags like #amwriting or #writing community, there's a lot of writers that are writing the same type of story that you're writing, and you could just strike up a conversation with them, and then they may know people that know people. Maybe they're already in a Facebook group, and that's how you can kind of join. So.
And if you're writing for kids from YA all the way on down, or illustrating, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators is a shortcut to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's important to not necessarily just jump right in, to read my stuff or I'll read your stuff, because you can get connected with somebody who's just like, oh, this is not a good fit. This just doesn't feel right to me. And that's kind of a side, getting you off the track of what you're trying to do. So it's good to hang out and meet a lot of people.
It's also
Or you
trial
decide
and
to
error,
jump into
too.
a
It
big
really
event.
is.
What's that?
It
It's
is
kind of trial and error too for a little bit.
Right, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because I've stayed friends with people that don't read my manuscripts
And
because I
that's
was like,
fine.
I'm
No,
good.
that's totally
we'll
fine.
Be friends.
Yeah, I feel like there's this idea that if you're friends with a writer, you absolutely have to read their manuscript and they have to read yours.
Right? No.
Not even a little bit. I have friends where we write completely different genres, and I just don't read their genre. But we're still friends. We're still part of the same writing community. We support each other 100%.
Which is still equally important, I would argue.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need writer friends who
Yeah.
won't read your work as well. Like just people to talk to on a day-to-day basis about the process, about being in the query trenches or submission hell or any of the other places you go when you do this job. Just
So many awful places.
so many, but great places too, guys. You know,
It's not awful.
and Amy and I have been friends for like four or 5 years, and we just now, like, I still have not read any of Amy's work. My reasoning is twisted because I'm afraid I won't like it, and then it'll like, you know, whatever. But we just started now passing works in progress back and forth. So it's trial and error. It's getting to know people. It's networking. It's finding your online community, and then hopefully your in-person community. A lot of libraries have writing groups. And, you know, there's a good chance you'll read somebody's stuff, like maybe you both write adult romance or adult thrillers, and then you realize you totally do not gel. And that's okay. It's just kind of just,
You can still be friends.
yeah, right, exactly.
We probably have time for one more.
Curious about each of your writing processes. Like, what does your day look like, or month? I don't know. Overall, and like, how do you get in the right space to write?
So, oh gosh. First of all, I want to be clear. It changes from book to book and process to process. But in general, I'm an early riser. I'm up before I have 2 kids, school-age kids, and as soon as they wake up, there's just no getting anything done. So I'm up like 5 or 6, and that's when I get. It's not even good writing because I'm tired, but just like that's where I can tap into the heart stuff, where I'm still tired enough to not put the filter up. And then I get them to school, and then I work for Bustle during the day. I write from home, so I usually do that stuff during the day. And then I head back to my computer at night after they go to bed and do a little more work. I do have some tricks, though. So when I'm working on a draft, I pick out a candle for each draft that smells like it, and I light it when I'm working on that draft so that it's like your body, your body's getting like, oh, yes, this candle is deep, dark forest. It's time to work on this Black Bear book. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of just reminds you that it's time, and it makes it a little ritual, right? You light your candle, put on some music, get started.
It's almost like
Stop it. So yeah, that's like my trick to tell my brain it's time to do this work, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really wait for inspiration, especially when you're a full-time writer like me. You got to sit down and do it every day. I just need to be fed. I can't write on an empty stomach. I tend to write at night. I've been trying to make myself write during the day, but that honestly, sometimes it's hit or miss. I'm kind of like you with the early morning thing. With me, late at night, I'm tired and I can just, you know, I'm not sitting there editing myself as I go, which is a huge thing to really hit the flow. It also changes every single book. Like I get this question a lot. I don't know, man. Sometimes I write at my dining room table from noon to 4. Sometimes I write in bed from midnight to 4. Like it really depends.
You need some structure and accountability. Like we will meet online in the evenings to like sprint together. So I'd be like, "Did you write today? Did you write today?" You get a little aggressive with each other so that you have some accountability too.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry.
Are you done?
One more thing. I also set timers. So if I'm really struggling to get into a book and like get focused, I will set a timer and be like, okay, for the next 10 minutes, I'm just gonna write. Or the next, you know, if I'm feeling a bit more into it, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, until I'm into it and I don't need the timer anymore to tell me what to do. So that helps a lot.
I'm completely opposite than both of them. I know, shocking, isn't it? I don't write every day. I don't even write. I haven't written in months. So it just depends. It really, yeah. I've had other stuff going on. I have to have everything else.
To be fair, you do have a book out for submission.
I do. It's
Yeah.
not like
So she's in the process. Congrats.
Thanks. There is one I finished and it's for sale. So I do have that happening. And that's usually, for me, I have to have a motivation of some sort. And I haven't had a lot. So I'm waiting for that moment of inspiration, which I know you said you can't have, which is why I haven't written in a few months.
Gotta just do it, man.
I know.
Get on our online chats.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm a very lone writer. I typically don't, and I don't know that I recommend it. For me, once I get that trigger though, I write very quickly. It's done in like a month. And then I have my draft, and then I revise. It is. So I'm a very binge writer. You know, it's not every day, so you may not want to write it. I don't want to write every day. It's too much.
I'm
but
a binge
when
writer too, and I also read it.
yes, oh my gosh,
This is what burnout looks like, people.
You're also extremely prolific. Like most people
yeah,
don't write
she
as much
writes
as
a
you
lot.
do,
Like
yeah.
this would have been, or this, I've had two. The one that got published, and then I had the one that's for sale, and then this would be like 3 that I in the past 2 or 3 years. So it's like a book a year. So I still have some time. It's only February, right? But yeah, so it just varies on what you're comfortable with. And so that is a learning for me, and it's something I'm working on. So see, you're not always, perfect.
Yeah.
out the
Final
gate.
thoughts, Patrick.
Yes, I would be a nighttime writer, but I have kids who get up really early in the morning. It just doesn't work, so I get up even earlier than they do and write for a couple hours, get them off to school, and kind of not doing other work right now. Seeking writing work, if there's anything. So I'm really trying to finish a draft of a book, and so I'll drop the boys off and go straight to the library. I am paying for this Freedom app,
Oh yeah.
and I'm knocked off the internet for probably 14, 15, 16 hours of the day, and it's helping my mental health, and it's helping my writing tremendously.
Aren't you afraid you're going to miss?
I am not really fearing I'm going to miss
All right.
something. I have no online presence or platform because I just feel like I would screw that up. So, I just I don't know. It just doesn't, that aspect doesn't work for me.
Okay.
Um,
You don't have
There's
to-
some
I don't
agents
think
who
it's
wouldn't take me on
No,
because
you
of
don't
that.
have to have it.
But anyway.
And that's
Yeah.
the thing, like, you don't need one, so.
Well, thank you again for joining us. And thank you for staying a few minutes over. We started late today, so I appreciate it.